where we do our weekend specials, where I answer all of your questions about history and social studies for an hour every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're getting a bit of a late start, but that's okay, mainly because I had to get my hair cut so that I could look good for all of you, I guess. I don't know. But anyways, so we do our Q&A, Ask Me Anything about history and social studies here on YouTube every Friday and Saturday. We have short form content dropping every day, long form videos that drop every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Go and check out yesterday's video about Macbeth, the real Macbeth, the history behind Macbeth. Something I think you all really enjoy, so please go check that out. And if you like history and social studies, may I suggest liking and subscribing and becoming a friendly neighborhood historian. It's as easy as that. If you really want to support the channel, consider donating, and that really helps the channel grow and all of that great stuff. We're in our usual studio for the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, but not our usual surroundings because I'm charging my phone right now. So hopefully you can hear me and everything's coming in clear. And again, if you like history and social studies and you have questions that you want to get asked, you are in the right place. Please drop your topic, question, comment, idea, historical, social studies, geopolitics, past and present, geography, politics, whatever it might be in the world of the social sciences in the chat, and I will be happy to answer it in a hopefully friendly, amicable way. That's what we do. We're an amicable, neighborly history channel. That's why we call ourselves the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. That, and I love Spider-Man. He happens to be my favorite superhero. So yes, if you enjoy what you hear and what you're listening to, you enjoy the topics we're talking about, the answers I'm giving, like I said, like and subscribe and become a friendly neighborhood historian. It helps the algorithm. It helps us out a lot. And if you want to help the channel grow more, consider joining, giving a super chat, a super comment, a perk comment, whatever it is, a donation. All that money goes towards making this channel better for all of you so that we can deliver history in an even more neighborly, more amicable manner. So we have a lot of that we're working on with the channel right now, including pre-recorded podcasts, creating a website, a brand logo, all of that stuff. This is something that we're going in deep about. We just got monetized in the last month on the second tier for YouTube, so anything helps with ad revenue and stuff like that, and revenue for the channel is always very welcome. So yes, if you have a question about history or social studies, please drop it in the chat and I'll be happy to answer it. Please participate in the community here on YouTube. Vote in our latest poll about what topic you want me to discuss tomorrow for our live stream lecture. Every Friday and Saturday, we have a Q&A, Ask Me Anything at 6 p.m. Eastern. And then on Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern, we have a live stream lec where I discuss a particular historical topic for an hour or so, and usually with a little bit of a Q&A afterwards. And then on Instagram, where you can follow us, friendly_history1, we continue the Q&A on Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern. So welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, where we talk all things social studies and social sciences. ACC, hello. ACOC, hello. Don't know why you've got an axe to grind with the European Union, but that's a lot of people nowadays. So yes, if you have questions about history and social studies, please drop them in the chat and I'll be happy to answer them. You get all of your questions, all of your yings about history answered here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, where we go for an hour answering your questions every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for joining us from Argentina. It's always awesome to have people from all over the world. Who was the real person behind the legend of Robin Hood? I don't think there really was a real person. The idea that Sir Walter Scott, who wrote that, and Ivanhoe, and was one of these writers in the 17th century who was kind of lionizing the medieval era, the era of knights and lords and ladies and chivalry. The idea he was drawing upon was the fact that the idea that he was really drawing on was the angst people felt against King John. King John had to raise. King John was the brother of King Richard, the Lionheart, the great Crusader king. And when John took over, he messed up the kingdom. He lost a bunch of wars. England really struggled under John's leadership, and he became one of the most hated and loathsome English kings. And if you check out my tier ranking video on the English kings, I have him at the bottom for a reason, and I go into more detail about that. But basically, Ivanhoe was the writer of Ivanhoe, Sir Walter Scott, wanted to show everybody exactly why he was such a hated figure. And decided to draw upon medieval chivalric ideas around it. That's why you have Friar Tuck. That's why you have Little John. That's why you have Maid Marian. All of those things are there. And obviously, when I think of Robin Hood, I think of the Disney movie that I grew up with Robin Hood, who is a fox. So I always think of a fox and not a real man. We have someone on the channel named Robin Hood who comes in once in a while and always asks great questions. But there you go. If you liked what I just explained about the history of Robin Hood, or lack thereof, you can like and subscribe. It's similar to King Arthur. It's a lionizing tale about the English, kind of a British nationalism sort of thing going on. And I see Simon the Bunny, my wonderful moderator, is here, and he has put the social media handles in the chat. So if you want to follow us here, follow us there on Facebook or Instagram or X. We would really appreciate it. It really helps the channel out. Again, like and subscribe if you enjoy history and all of that great stuff. So, yeah. Let's see, we will go for about another hour, so till about 7:30 Eastern. What if the Library of Alexandria had never been destroyed? How different would our world be today? Who knows what kind of access and information would be available, what kind of things that were lost to history that would have been preserved if the Library of Alexandria hadn't been destroyed. But the real truth of the matter is the vast majority of documentation, of documents, books, codices that we have from that era actually probably were available already in other places, but far more, but we probably would have had bigger segments, more historical dating, more understanding of particular documents from the ancient world, probably fuller text, more completed texts, rather than just scraps and manuscripts. It would have made it easier for the copying down and the maintaining of ancient records and ideas from the greatest philosophers of Egypt, Greece, and Rome. So who knows? Yeah, I'm not sure, Kiara. I think it would have made it more advanced. It probably would have made the Enlightenment a little bit and Renaissance a little bit earlier in human history, but it really wasn't a huge, I don't know how much was actually lost and was completely lost to history because the Library of Alexandria was destroyed. So anyways, if anyone has a question about history or social studies, I'm here to serve. And we go live here every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Really appreciate seeing you and having you here to discuss history in a friendly, amicable manner with us, like we do all the time on this channel. We have daily shorts and we have long-form videos every Monday and Friday that drop at 8 p.m. Eastern. And you can go and vote here on the YouTube channel for the live stream lecture topic and what you want me to discuss on our live stream lecture every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Yuda, great to see you again. It's the Memorial Day of the fall of the Jerusalem Temple of 73 AD. It was 70 AD when it was destroyed. Any insight into how the population was starved or how the war was handled internally? Basically, the Romans got tired of Jewish resistance, guerrilla warfare tactics, and basically the tenacity of the Jewish army against the much larger Roman legions. Basically, the Romans went for complete broke, basically trying to destroy every semblance of Jewish culture and identity, while killing off the Jewish rebels any way they can through starving them. This is what was happening at Masada. That was in 73 AD. And of course, destroying their religious symbol, the temple, was a huge blow to Jewish cultural identity. It led to the restructuring of both the Jewish religion and the early Christian religion, one of the biggest events of the first century, and it impressed upon the Jews the ideas that the Romans were indeed their oppressors, and it fueled the flames of future revolutions in that area, such as the Bar Kokhba revolt, which led to the 136. When it was put down, the Romans renamed the land area Syria Palestina, and renamed Jerusalem's area Capitolina. I think it would be incredible to have access to something like that. It could have had knowledge change the course of human history. Yeah, it's amazing what kind of knowledge was actually available at the Temple of Alexandria, at the Library of Alexandria, and how much more of incomplete or lost text we might be able to have, and how much more research and development might have happened because of that. We don't know. Hamal, great to see you. Simon is asking, do you think climate has had a big impact in the rise of empires or more important factors at play? I guess it's a mix of geography, access to water, and farming climate. I mean, Japan's entire society, if you look at their social structure, especially in the medieval period, farmers were on the bottom of their society, or were not at the bottom like they were in European society, because terrace farming, rice farming, and farmland is scarcer in Japan than it is in mainland China or in Europe. So farmers actually had a greater social impact on the Japanese culture and life than merchants. So merchants were actually lower in the feudal system of the Japanese, which, yes, included the shoguns, the warlords called the daimyos, and the samurai with their own chivalric-like code called Bushido. And yes, please like the live and subscribe. But yeah, climate plays a part. One of the things that kept Japan independent was 2 typhoons that destroyed the armies of the Yuan Mongol Chinese who tried to conquer Japan in the early 1300s or late 1200s. Hello, good to see you. Ricky, always a pleasure. What if humanity's greatest civilizations like the Sumerians or the Indus Valley didn't vanish but evolved silently, leaving behind clues we're yet to understand? They definitely did evolve. I mean, eventually the Paleo-Babylonian Empire was formed. The city-state structure of the early Babylonians and Assyrians developed into more hardline kingdoms, thanks to people like Sargon of Akkad. So there's that. What else? At the same time, and this is what Simon was just asking about climate and how much it impacts the European, or how much has it impacted world history. One of the most fascinating things about the climate is the loss of the Indus River civilization was mainly because of climatological factors, flooding and things like that, that really overwhelmed their major cities. And that, coupled with the Indo-Aryan settlement and invasion in the 16th century BC, 17th century BC, was more than enough to do away with their civilization and society. So it is interesting. What if those civilizations had continued? They did continue, but in different forms. All of the tenets, and you can watch my video on the rise of the Indo-Aryans and the caste system, the Varna system in India, Kiara, if you want to learn more. But all of the structural systems of India that are quintessential to its long-standing culture, including Hinduism, the Varna system, and the Vedas, came about. Those were predated before the Vedas were even written by the Indus River civilization, which developed some of those early ideas that were eventually codified during the Veda period by the Indo-Aryans. GA, good to see you. Hello. And yes, please check us out on Substack if you want to read my articles. You can go to Patreon and you've got my early access to things. No worries, Ricky, whenever you can. TI, I am very sorry about your cat. I love cats. I mean, they're gorgeous, beautiful animals. I've had several in my life, and they're always just such incredible partners. Very, very docile, usually. So it's really interesting to talk about these topics. I'm studying history at the University of Buenos Aires, and I am fascinated by your channel. Well, I am fascinated that you are here, Kiara, to join us from Argentina. Simon is from Great Britain. GA, I don't know where you're from, but I'm assuming it's not the United States. I'm an American, and by American, I mean from the United States. People don't say United Statesian. They usually just say American, but we've got people who join us all the time on this channel, longtime friendly neighborhood historians who have liked and subscribed, even donators and people who support the channel in different ways, from Great Britain, from Norway, from Russia, from Sweden. It's always so great to see people who join us from all over the world, of all different backgrounds, stripes, beliefs, and creeds, who support the Friendly Neighborhood History channel and support the work that we are doing, and I really appreciate that. What is your favorite breed? Mine was Russian Blue. I love tabbies. Russian Blues are gorgeous, though. Freshly, great to see you as always, one of my ever wonderful moderators. Please show some love to my moderators, Simon and Freshly. Gayahan, great to see you. Longtime friendly neighborhood historian. GA, if you could put that in English, please, I'd be able to probably help you better. Nakish, thank you for joining us from Pakistan. Wonderful place, talking about the Indus River Valley, the earliest Indian civilization. Most of it was in Pakistan, near the Punjab region. So there you go. Why did so many civilizations self-differentiate into artisans, farmers, workers, priests? Does this historical record indicate that humans are hierarchical? Yes. And whether they use religion or culture or economic experiences, there's always this idea of someone on top and someone answering to them for different reasons. The idea of a monarchy where you have a ruler and he's the ruler because once in a long time ago, his great-great-great-grandfather was this amazing king who united all of our people, and therefore all of his descendants are worthy of being followed and obeyed like they are a god. That doesn't ring well for our ears in the 21st century, but that was how you united a civilization. Strong leaders basically saying, this is what I have created, therefore you must follow me and my line. What made areas like the Athenian democracy and the Roman Republic interesting was you had great rulers like Pericles and Cincinnatus who were willing to give up power after they had done the right thing, or at the very least not create a dynasty that would hold on to power for too long. This changed obviously with the Caesars and the rise of Alexander the Great in Greece. But anyways, Otter, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. I'm most proud of the fact that Pachytus was found in Pakistan, one of the most important evidence of whale evolution. Interesting. I don't know what Pachytus is, so you're going to have to tell me more about that, Nakish. What is the big white hubs of humans starting civilization? What were the big hubs of humans starting civilization? I know there was Mesopotamia, Indus, and China. I forget the name. There was a particular valley in China where the earliest civilization was founded. Was it the Hongho? Hongho, something like that. It was the Huanghe River Valley, Huanghe River Valley. That was one of the most ancient rivers in China, and that's where the early civilizations were going on. Okay. You also have TI. You have African civilizations, but are more based in migration, so they're not as steady and as the farming communities that eventually led to settlements and civilizations in Mesopotamia, Africa. Just notice wherever there's a lot of rivers, you're going to have civilization. The Nile, the Indus, later the Ganges, and obviously the Tigris and the Euphrates. What if time isn't linear and ancient civilizations were actually more advanced than we are today, but in ways we can't yet comprehend? Probably not. I just don't think time is linear. It's an interesting theory. I mean, the hypotheticals about history are quite fascinating. There's a place for it, but there's also a place for realizing what history is and what history is trying to teach us now. Interesting. Paquitas. It was on a four-legged wolf-like creature. That's cool. You said it was related to whales, though? Why were Central and South American natives more advanced than North American natives? That's an interesting question. From the earlier civilizations, you have much more interest in architecture, archaeology. Working with stone was a lot bigger. Working with solid minerals, rocks, building structures that were more permanent and less transit. So it was access to supplies and materials, starting with people like the Olmecs, who loved jade and rocks. Then you have the Mayans, the Zapotecs, the Toltecs, the Aztecs, the Incas in the south. So the civilizations seem to be more concrete, literally, in how they built their architecture compared to some of the Native American tribes. Although you have to understand there are different types of Native American tribes. You have the Longhouse Native American tribes in the northeast of America. Thinking of all natives as using wigwams and teepees is an exaggeration. Many Native Americans use various different types of living structures. The Pueblo Indians used clay and adobe. So whatever in their recent, which was in abundance in their area in the American Southwest. So the truth of the matter is the Native Americans, based on where they were, found whatever materials were easiest for them to be able to build structures. If you can build it out of animal hide when you're hunting the animal anyways, that is an easy way to build the canopies for your wigwams and teepees. If you have stone, you can build stronger, more permanent settlements like the Mayans did. Yes. Let me see here. And Nakish, refer back to what Simon just said. AC, good to see you. Winners of wars shape our belief society history throughout time. We allow genocide in Gaza. How do you think the world would be shaped if Germany won World War II? I technically believe that it's World War III, and I don't believe there's a genocide going on in Gaza. I think it's rank, basically inhumane killing at this point, but I would not characterize it as a genocide necessarily. You've got to understand the difference in tiers and things like that. I don't think it would be the same result whatsoever. I mean, obviously, who knows what kind of influence the Nazis would have had over the United States and Great Britain, what they would have done to the Soviets, what they would have done to Jews and other peoples. More access and control in Eastern Europe would have led to the deaths of far more Romani gypsies and Slavs if the Soviet Union had not defeated them there. So there's a lot of things that would have been different. North American natives were more hunter-gatherers, and they would continually move, probably. Yes, more itinerant, to be sure. To what extent did the economic reforms of Diocletian stabilize the late Roman Empire, and were they substantial? Diocletian redid the bureaucratic civil system that had fallen apart during the 3rd century. What made Diocletian excellent at what he did was he was a pragmatist, and he basically believed that whatever was in front of him that was challenging had a practical solution. If he could come up with a practical solution, he could stop the bleeding. So if the Roman Empire during the crisis of the 3rd century, and by the way, Chiara, you might like my full-length videos on Constantine, Diocletian, and all my Roman Emperor videos, of which I've done an entire series on that too, of shorts mainly. But the truth of the matter is that Diocletian, for the stabilizing of the bureaucracy, and then to make it easier for management, cutting down the Roman bureaucracy by restructuring the imperial system. So you have a larger emperor in one area, and you have a junior emperor in the same area, and you have a west and an east. This division actually made it easier for direct management of the land, and it made it a lot harder for opportunists to seize power. which is something that had been an issue throughout the 3rd century. Diocletian himself had been one of these opportunists. Obviously, an opportunist named Constantine, whose father was already a junior emperor, would seize power very soon in his own way. But Diocletian was an utter pragmatist, and that's how he kept the Roman Empire going. Let me see here. Dr. Vincius, good to see you. Goat, thank you for joining us from Greece. Let me see. Running Man, I don't care what you think about my mustache. It's not supposed to be a mustache. I just haven't shaved in a couple days. If Rome had been reunited by Franks, would Europe still have surpassed the rest of Eurasia? It already did, and it was reunited by Franks in many ways. That's how Charlemagne basically created several of the permanent states in Europe because of his activity. Think of the Papal States. That was all Charlemagne. Any knowledge of the song Yankee Doodle, George Washington Battle Hymn? I don't know about the George Washington Battle Hymn. Vincent, I really appreciate the donation. It's really helpful. Everything you do for the channel is really wonderful, and I love having you here. And if you guys want to support the channel as well, you can put in a donation or a perk comment like Vincent just did. But yeah, Vincent, Yankee Doodle is obviously one of those patriotic songs. Most of the patriotic songs of America were written in the 19th century. Thank you for joining us from Brazil. So we got people from Brazil. Thank you, T.I. That's so kind of you. I really appreciate that. And you are one of my favorite people who joins us all the time. Let me see. I think it's genocide at this point, but genocide is a legal term that can be discussed. There are certainly war crimes and intent for ethnic cleansing. Now that you vote, you have to admit. Yes, to some extent, there certainly is. It's not that I'm dying to defend one particular side. I'm just dying to, I'm not dying, I don't even use the term in this discussion, but I want to look at what's happening. I want to put it in a historical perspective. I want to understand how it compares to other genocides, because I think that term is thrown out way too brazenly with people not understanding contextual factors. Killing your enemies in a war at a heavy rate is not a genocide. The United States did not commit a genocide in Japan with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I wouldn't say that the Native Americans were victims of genocide. The vast majority of them were victims of disease that was usually unintentionally spread by the Europeans, who really didn't understand how diseases worked and had built up immunities through the centuries due to evolutionary adaptation in Europe. But that does so. There's obviously a lot of question marks into how unjust and ridiculously cruel this war has become. That doesn't automatically mean one thing or another. Let me see here. Simon is one of the OG channel members, one of the best moderators on YouTube, and a legend here in the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, if you want to know, T.I. How did the implement of the Edict of Nantes in 1598 impact the religious and political balance in France? And could its revocation in 1685 be seen as a catalyst for future conflicts? Basically, throughout the 16th century, the French Calvinists, who were heavily influenced by Jean Calvin, who was a Frenchman, who is one of the leading Protestant reformers, the French Huguenots had struggled through persecution from the Catholic establishment, particularly from the various kings, who were heavily influenced in the middle of the century by a woman named Catherine de' Medici. And during the time of Catherine de' Medici and several of her pawns who were in the throne, who were family members of her, including her sons, the French had a series of wars of religion between the Catholic establishment and the Huguenots, who were the French Calvinists and Protestants, and this led to a series of back and forths, and eventually the final straw was Henry IV, I think it was the fourth, who rose to power, and despite being a Protestant, he converted to Catholicism, but created the Edict of Nantes as a religious toleration aspect, allowing Huguenots to practice their Calvinism throughout France. Their persecution would come back under Louis XIV, who believed that it was his right as the absolute monarch. I forget the name, the French phrase. Mon Dieu est mi droit, my God, am I right? God, am I right? Or something like that was his phrase, and he basically believed that he had every right to punish the wicked Protestants who were rebelling against the Catholic Church, and he, as the head of the state, was also responsible for the maintenance of the Catholic Church. This led to a bunch of them fleeing and going to North and South Carolina, by the way. Do you believe corruption on Arab states played a significant role fighting against Israel and conducting large-scale military operations in general? Corruption and radicalism, yes. Yes, the super chat. I always forget what it's called, but really appreciate the super chat, Vincent. You're a real one. How did Brazil get part of Latin America if they speak Portuguese and not Spanish? Is the Caribbean part of Latin America? It's part of the Americas. There's Central America and South America. That's literally considered Latin America. Before Central America was colonized by the Spanish, it was called Mesoamerica. So the ancient peoples are usually called the Mesoamericans. Their field of study is different than Latin American history. In 1494, the Pope drew a treaty saying that the eastern portions of the world, the East Indies, was to be populated and could be colonized by the Portuguese. The West was open to the Spanish, who had arrived before them. This treaty, which was later redefined, eventually became the grounds on which the Portuguese kept pushing the line westward and could settle and colonize Brazil. Because they settled and colonized Brazil, that is their westernmost point of territory, where everything west of that belongs to the Spanish. The Portuguese held on to Brazil until the 1820s, when they became an independent empire after Napoleon, which Napoleon destabilizing the Spanish and the Portuguese kingdoms during his Peninsular War, where he tried to put his brother in charge of Spain, led to emboldened revolutionary movements throughout Central and South America. Simón Bolívar obviously was a huge responsibility for the independence of places like Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador. And you also have revolutions in Argentina, and eventually Dom Pedro I takes over Brazil as its first emperor in 1821. So ever since then, Brazil has been independent. You'd say Europe during the Roman period was more advanced than their contemporaries in China and Iran at the time. No, maybe more so than Iran, but the Han Dynasty in China was really advanced. I tell this from Greek perspective. We suffer the corruption, the level of Russia. I don't know what you mean by that. Gonna have to fix that sentence. Australian Aborigines a genocide? Not sure. I mean, the vast majority of them were wiped out, and I would want to know the exact circumstances. Is it comparable to the Europeans in North America? I'm just not as much of an expert on what happened to the Aboriginal peoples of Australia and New Zealand. And I like actually referring to all indigenous peoples as Aboriginal. The First Nations, the Native Americans, there's various different terminologies that are argued back and forth, but Aboriginal is a very good way to put it. The Aborigines in Australia were called the Australian Aborigines. So. And thank you, Simon. Yeah, I love making that short about the Medicis, one of the most influential and important families in European history. Would you rather be an American gunslinging cowboy or a sword-wielding medieval knight? Speaking of which, today is the death anniversary. I do death, birth, and daily history videos every day. Today's the death anniversary of Aces and Eights himself, Wild Bill Hickok, one of the greatest gunslingers. Medieval knight. Because you have a responsibility, your knights originally were quite brutish, quite thuggish, were more refined by the church, and chivalry is exaggerated in its impact, but it was something that was expected by knights, especially as they swore vassal loyalty to their lords and nobles. Linguistics can help us explain so much about history. I've been watching some of the big linguist YouTubers, and there's some fascinating discoveries based on just linguistic reconstruction. Certainly there is. Thank you so much for your answers. They help me a lot to understand things better. Sorry if I'm being too much. You are not. I appreciate all of your questions. Cooking Master, hello. Good to see you. What do you think on Iran? What about Iran currently? I don't know what you mean. Louisiana and Quebec are part of Latin America. Hot take of the day. Yeah, that's an exaggeration to be sure. I mean, the Spanish did own Louisiana for a time. How did the interplay between religious authority and emerging scientific thoughts during the Renaissance shape the trajectory of Western civilization, and can parallels be drawn with modern shifts? How did the interplay between... So, the Renaissance kicked off this idea of studying the importance of the human. This is what humanism is, and this intensified during the scientific revolution, which was studying not just God, but God's creation and human relations to that. This led to developments in anatomy and astronomy. This led to amazing scientists like Kepler, Copernicus, and of course Galileo. I think that the Renaissance, the idea of humanism, followed by the scientific revolution, which inspired the Age of Reason and the Enlightenment, all of these things were intended to be a reinterpretation and addendum to religious ideas of the time, a clarification about these things as religious authority became more and more questioned, especially during the Reformation. But I think they ended up being a huge a huge deterrent from religious authority in Europe. And if you look at the French Revolution, you see a great example of how the structures of thinking, studying the human mind, reason, behind the elevation of these things eventually led to the zero-sum game where religious authority lost a lot of its predominance, and the church was often very stubborn in the way that it interplayed with these things. Florida is more Latin America than Quebec. Yes, that's very fair. Suriname, Guyana, and Belize are not Latin America. What do you think about Iran-Israel war? You mean the 12 Days War? Once again, another very short war that really doesn't do much in the Middle East, but frustrate a lot of people and cause a lot of tensions. I think it will be interesting to see what U.S.-Iran relations look like in 5 years, and if this is actually the point of a change in U.S.-Iran relations, because ever since the Iranian Revolution, the United States and Iran have been mortal enemies. OTAC, good to see you as always. Hillary Clinton should be in jail. Yeah, that's a hot take that's not becoming hot anymore. More and more people are thinking that because of the release of the emails and stuff like that. Let me see there. Joe, there's no reason to scream your responses. Have you heard any legend or book related to both alleged red-haired giants in North America? Yes, the Native Americans and other native groups throughout history have referred to and implied in both their mythological legends and their oral histories, which is common for itinerant peoples like in Africa or in Central or South America, have talked about native giants. It seems to be this one of these things where it's something that every human culture has stories on giants. They're in almost all of the ancient religious texts and symbols. There's obviously a fascination with people who are big, strong, and intimidating. And by the way, giants back then could be 7 or 8 feet, which we would see, yeah, that's giant, but that's like really, like Shaq's that tall. Yeah, that's obviously really tall, but people were a lot shorter back then too. I feel like you're working on some homework. I am not. Oh, you were talking to Kiara, sorry. Okay, everyone like the stream, please do. You're gonna be a history teacher? Already am one. Yeah, it'd be awesome if we got to 9,000. We're at 8,900. We're over 8,900 friendly neighborhood historians, and you can be one too if you like and subscribe. That's how awesome it is. We're on an amazing ride. We've been doing this for almost a year and a half. And to get to 9,000, 10,000 by Labor Day is the goal, would just be absolutely fantastic. And we're expanding. We're on TikTok now, Friendly History, where you can get more. There's exclusive content there that you can't get here, and there's exclusive content here that you can't get there. And there's early releases available for members here and on Patreon. Who were the Aborigines? On different native, I usually refer to different native groups throughout the world as Aboriginal, but the Aborigines are typically the natives of Australia, the Australian continent settled by the British in the late 18th, early 19th century. Obviously, despite, like, as was the case with many native groups in many different areas, early initial positive relations eventually cascaded, and I think 95% of the Aboriginal population has died off in the last 2 centuries. What do you mean the original? In what ways did the philosophical and political ideas of the Enlightenment directly contribute to both the advancement and the constructions of revolutionary movements in the 18th and 19th centuries? So the Enlightenment, you have the political side of the Enlightenment, which leads to the development of liberal democracies, classical liberalism, social contract, general will, popular sovereignty. Many of the modern forms of democracy that we seem to be in love with in the West come from thinkers like Locke and Rousseau. You have the idea of natural rights, of the need of good government, or efficient government. You have absolutist monarchy being endorsed by Leviathan and Thomas Hobbes. John Locke's Second Treatise on Government, where he asserts that people have a right to life, liberty, and property, is commandeered by Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence. It's enshrined by the U.S. Constitution. The French Constitution does the same thing. So yeah, there's a lot there, to be sure. Obviously, looking back on one of the more disastrous experiments of the Enlightenment, the French Revolution, and the violence and the reign of terror inspired Marx to create many of his ideas. Have you been to European countries? Not really. Taylor Lautner? Who's Taylor Lautner, by the way? Isn't that the guy that dated Taylor Swift? I don't know. The name sounds really familiar. I hope he's good looking. You always say World War III instead of World War II. What are the other world wars then? Yes, as many of you know, I think that the 7 Years' War in the 1750s and 60s was the First World War, and then you have World War II would be the Great War, and World War III. Oh, the Twilight guy? Oh, God, is that Edward? Lord help me. But yeah, Great Wars, World War II, Nazis, World War III. That's how it works. He's the actor from Twilight, and he's generally seen as good looking. Okay, whatever. GA, what's up? What do you want to talk about? You said God. God what? Thank you, TI. I appreciate it. I just don't like Twilight. The other one, the werewolf dude. Oh, good lord. Yes. Yes, let's have sympathy for savage creatures that were made to originally terrify and intimidate people into obeying, which is what vampires and werewolves are. Let's make them hot. Ridiculous. By the way, I'm not sponsored by Crystal Geyser, at least not yet, but it is an excellent water. Please drink it. I'm actually thinking about misleading people and saying and not doing paid promotion, but like stopping my video just to do a fake advertisement for something I like, even though they're not paying me, in hopes that they will watch the video and then offer to pay me. What's your scholarly perspective on the feasibility and historical impact of Nikola Tesla's so-called Death Ray project? Don't know much about it. I am close to getting merch. We're close to brand logo. We're close to a website. We're close to a domain. Pre-recorded podcasts and stuff like that will be coming up. All of them will be available on the website. So we are moving forward. I always wanted to have an old Romanian anti-vampire kit. Yes, a good one too. What's the history behind the spooky creatures, zombies, werewolves, vampires, mummies? It's obviously a fascination with the dead and a kind of a dark romantic, which was a literary movement in the 19th century, obsession with life coming back but not being in the same form. So you kind of have, instead of a resurrection of Christ, you have the anti-resurrection of the dead, that obsessions with death, with carnal relations, with all of these things were extremely popular. Yeah, that's kind of where it comes from. A history water bottle with your favorite moments at Waterfield. Oh, that would be awesome. Have merch of like Waterloo or Friendly Neighborhood History. I would love to get like t-shirts that have like George Washington, Lincoln, and Napoleon all smiling at you. Something like that. Yeah. One of the people involved in the sabotage of the Nazi Germany nuclear weapon programs lived in my area. That must have been fun. Did you ever meet this individual? I don't know where the term comes from, Lance. It's I'm trying to think. I think it might have Latin roots, but I'm not 100% sure. School stuff, hello. I like it because actually academics, historical academics, anthropologists use the term to enclose and describe people from all over the world in different areas of the world at different times who were itinerant. School stuff, no. No. Bad boy. To what extent do prevailing historical narratives reflect on the biases of our chroniclers, and how can modern historiography effectively reconstruct marginalized or suppressed voices without imposing present-day interpretations? Are you taking the AP test and you need answers? So, yeah, basically, I'm of the notion that history is written by the victors, but so what? And I know that sounds harsh, but the best way to figure out if the history written by the victors is actually valid is to try to synthesize it with as many disparate and different sources as you possibly can, to read multiple perspectives. It's not normally the history that is written by the victors in the sense of the facts, but it's the interpretation of those facts and the way they try to manipulate the way you believe about those facts that actually spills the narrative. So a great example of history being written by the victor when it wasn't even history at all, and I'll use the background, is from my most recent video on this guy. This is Macbeth. He's the Scottish king, the Scottish play, and him and Lady Macbeth are depicted as these savage monsters in one of the most fascinating plays in all of history. It's Shakespeare's shortest and perhaps most violent tragedy. But the real story of Macbeth is that he was actually a decent king who was killed off by an ancestor of the current English King James VI or James I, who was the patron of Shakespeare. So people write histories to pander to their patrons, to people who support them. So the Flavians hire and adopt Josephus, and he writes a detailed chronicle of the Jewish revolt, despite the fact that he had been a general in that war, and gives the Romans the benefit of the doubt and paints Vespasian in a great light when he comes to power as the Roman emperor in 69 AD. And Shakespeare, seeking to legitimize the union of the crowns between England and Scotland, tries to look for connectivity between England and Scotland, so he demonizes a Scottish king who was very pro-Scottish and compliments Malcolm, who defeats Macbeth, thanks to Macduff, who did not live at that time. Macduff lived a century before. And Malcolm the Third is the great-grandfather of Henry II, who is the father of Richard the Lionheart and King John, who I talked about at the beginning, who is an ancestor of so the Scottish and English family intermarrying and being connected for all these centuries is what Shakespeare is trying to show. So Macbeth, who is not part of that union, is the bad guy. When Macbeth and Lady Macbeth in real life were pretty much just pro-Scottish kings, a king and queen of this land called Alba. So there's an example of that. And yes, go check out that video on Macbeth. It was very fun to learn about it. And I knew Macbeth was a real character, but I didn't know nearly as much until I read about it yesterday and made the video. The term aboriginal comes from the phrase ab origine, from the beginning. Original, ab from is a, there you go. It's very Latin. He was at my school and talked about it. I really would love to hear that talk. Let me see. Did you read the book Shakespeare wrote about King Henry VI? Why is he said to be a weak and unstable ruler? King Henry VI, actually, from all historical accounts, because look, I love Shakespeare. I'm not trying to demonize Shakespeare or any victor who writes history. I get it. Shakespeare was good also at poking fun at his own side. Shakespeare was very good at understanding that just being an English and an Elizabethan early King James, early Stuart setting, the Stuart family was the family of King James, who is, by the way, the patron of the King James Bible and so many other things in English literature that is important to us today. But I get the reason why people have these perspectives. But Henry VI was the grandson of Charles VI, who was the unstable king of France, who because of his mental illness was severely weakened in his ability to fight against Henry VI's father, Henry V, who forced Charles's daughter to marry him, and then they had their child, and that became Henry VI. And he basically relied on his wife to do everything that she could to fight the war, the 100 Years' War, which went downhill because of a little girl named Joan of Arc, and then to try to hold on to Lancaster control against the rising Yorkist family in the War of the Roses. Yes. Let me see here. Thank you so much. Really sorry if I've been a bit too much, but I'm fascinated by all this stuff. I want to be like you. Oh, well, Kiara, the way you ask questions and the way you premise your questions with so much knowledge and acumen, you're already well on your way. I really appreciate that. How do you know about so much? I don't know. I think that the synapses in my brain are wired to where I see the connections in history and I chart them, and then I really heavily invest in them and they become something that fascinates me. So I'm just kind of obsessing about Macbeth yesterday because this story shows A, how history is written by the victors, and B, how history is forgotten, because not only do we forget that Macbeth was a very pro-Scottish king, but we also forget the fact that Macbeth lived. A lot of people don't know Macbeth is a historical play. Shakespeare wrote histories, tragedies, and comedies. Macbeth is a tragedy, but it's also technically a history. And it's, a grossly exaggerated misappropriation of history, but Macbeth was a real king. Macduff was a real king a century before Macbeth lived. These are all true statements, by the way. So, the lady just protests too much. Me thinks, what are my favorite lines from Shakespeare? Oh, I love Shakespeare. I do love Shakespeare. It's just, he was purposely doing something with Macbeth that was totally political and not historical. So really, Kiara, the answer is if you can get the politics out of the history, you might actually have a chance of writing something that's potentially objective. My job as a historian is to tell the truth, and I do my absolute best to be as objective as I possibly can. And I work really hard at it, and I love it when people call me a right-wing lunatic and a left-wing nutjob, because it means I'm doing something right, and that's angering everyone. I'm sure you've mentioned this already, but I'll just throw it. King James had just written a book on witchcraft, so Shakespeare added in right before and that was the time of great fear of witches. So the cultural context, witch persecution doesn't start in Salem and Massachusetts in 1692. It started in the colonies before then, but was already prevalent in England and many parts of Europe throughout the 17th century. So trying to catch up with the chat. What are you talking about, Rando? And yeah, it is you. Good to see you. I don't know what you're referring to. The NFL office, is that the New York thing that happened? Just going through the chats here. Alba was referred to when Tertullian traveled to Alba to train with Scaurus on the Isle of Psyche. Alba means mountain range, and it's the same origin or etymology as the Alps in Central Europe. Interesting. I did not know that, so thank you. By the way, Alba was mainly in the lowlands. The Highlanders were a far more remote group of people who were not subdued as part of a Scottish kingdom when Macbeth ruled. And part of the area is also called Strathclyde. The Romans could never conquer this region when it was called Caledonia because of the easy access and knowledge of the Highlands by the Scottish fighters. Ever wondered why we call it left and right? It all started with seating arrangements during, yep, wrote an entire Substack about that. Thank you so much, Simon. Yes, a loony left compared to myself, right-wing nut job. I think you are really objective. You are the best. Oh, thank you so much, Simon. I do my absolute best to be as objective as I possibly can. The Sports for Children program has Lawrence Taylor on it. He had relations with underage trafficked people. That's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. Yes. I mean, again, I just don't know anymore about this stuff. I think people love guilt by association, and I hate guilt by association. As a historian, I know better than to do guilt by association. It's the Hitler drank water and you're drinking water, and I hate that with a passion. And so it's really prickly to me when I hear, see, this political figure shook hands with this political figure and is working with that political figure, so therefore they must be in cahoots in doing this other inane act. So, I know this isn't directly related to history, but I'm curious, how do you personally interpret the concept of what lies beyond death, considering different cultural and psychological, philosophical perspectives throughout time? What was the job and why did he give it to him is what I'm wondering. So there's different cultural and philosophical perspectives. I think people are afraid and unsure about death because they are afraid and unsure of the unknown. We don't really have solid history that says, hey, this person's been dead and is alive and it can explain this to you. That's obviously the core of the Christian faith, for instance. Reincarnation, the idea that, oh, you don't die, you just come back again, goes back to the ancient Egyptians, and the Romans had some ideas of that, and of course the Hindus. But the real truth of the matter is, it's historically and culturally a way to sate people's minds about what happens to them when you can't 100% sure say one way or another. King James I, Scotland, gay. There's a YouTube video of that subject, but how much was accurate? Did he like men? I love the paintings of him. He has great paintings. He was the Duke of, I forget his name, his first name was George, and he was one of James, and Netflix made a documentary about him, or a series about him. It was all about how his mother was using him to seduce the English king and take power. I don't know how much of that is true. I tend to believe very little of what Netflix tries to present to me as historically true, even in their documentaries. If James was into men, he was definitely bisexual, not gay. He had a wife with several different children, including his son, who became king after him. I don't see him, he might have been, but I feel that that's a gotcha. I've seen this for years, and I feel like it's more of a gotcha for people who like the King James Bible, who are usually Christians, for people to say, haha, the guy who made it was gay. And it's like, okay, who cares? But more importantly, I don't know. I think there might have been the possibility of that. Male relations were far more intimate in the sense of hand-holding, kissing and embracing, even sleeping in the same bed or living in the same houses for centuries throughout the medieval and early modern period, especially in Europe. It's really only in the last century that men have become more distant in their emotional connectivity, especially in the Americas. So I don't know. He might have been, but I think there's definitely a chance he was, but I think it's a little overblown. Buckingham. Yeah, there's rumors about Buckingham. That was his name. He was the Duke of Buckingham. And maybe they probably did. I don't know if that means he was bi-curious. These terminologies are hard for us to define. Understanding how bisexuality and homosexuality have worked throughout human history is not a neat box that we can put into a post-gay rights movement in the 2010s and 2020s. Sports program for children, and there are so many other NFL people he could have chosen. Probably because Taylor supported him, would be my best guess. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and have to read more about that because I just don't know. Apologies, I joined late, so please skip this if it's being discussed. Good to see you again, by the way. What do you think of Shakespeare's portrayal of King Richard III? I think there is actually evidence that Richard did have a back to Normandy, but I think once again we've got to look at who Shakespeare's writing about. I don't know when he wrote King Richard III. I know that he wrote Macbeth after James became king. He might have written Richard III when Elizabeth was queen, which would make more sense because the Tudor dynasty, her grandfather Henry VII legitimized it by killing Richard III at Bosworth Field. So let me see here. Moving forward. There was a BBC show called Mary and George that had that handsome actor, Nicholas Galazanti, can't spell it right, playing his lover, I think. Let me see. Right now, I'm really interested in focus on interpreting the block universe theory, the idea that past, present, and future all coexist in a fixed four-dimensional structure challenges our usual perception of time and reality. It's fascinating to think about how this perspective could escape our understanding of free will, causality, and the nature of the universe itself. As a historian, it's just easier for me to think that time is linear. I'll leave that to the physicists. I'm just not an expert. Yeah, 8 kids. I mean, to do the deed at least 8 times, you can't just be fully one way, in my opinion. And vice versa, by the way. In some cultures, it's still common for men to be intimate in a way that might be seen as gay by us. Kind of, yeah. I'm sorry, but I stole your heart, Vincent. I missed the part about Macbeth. I'm Scottish. He was wild. He was wild, but highly exaggerated, and was actually pretty good for the Scottish when he was king. I mean, he expanded the charity. He brought them closer to the church. He expanded the territory of Alba. He brought more and more of the lowlands into the Scottish domain. I mean, he was a good king. He had just gotten it through murdering someone, and he didn't kill an old man in a bed. He killed a man who was 4 years older than him in a battle. Shakespeare wanted Macbeth to look bad because he wanted Scottish nationalism to look bad because he wanted to justify the union of the crowns and the familial line of James I, who was his patron. So, Liam, that's what I was talking about, but good to see you. You had a question earlier. I never got around to answering it. What was it exactly? You can put it in the chat again. So, let me see. And we've got about 10 more minutes, so please like and subscribe if you haven't already. An example would be Middle Eastern countries where men kiss each other as a form of greeting or the cheek. I don't know if that's really homosexual or anything necessarily. I mean, some people in the West who don't know better would assume that that's gay, but that's an extremely culturally insensitive approach. But then again, Americans never surprised for being culturally insensitive. Yeah. The idea that men shake hands is a modern concept. Men don't hug. A handshake is as good as a hug. This is all modern concepts, modern, almost stereotypes, in my opinion, of white normative culture in America, especially after the last World War. It can be seen as that, but I think it would be hard even for Americans, but maybe it's just me because I know so much about history and cultures of other areas, to look at 2 men who kiss when they meet each other with a peck on the cheek and say, wow, gay, that's gay. King Harold, but then again, I'm not prone to say that anyways because it's almost always used pejoratively, and I don't want to do that. So, in 1066, King Harold marched over 9,000 troops to Hastings to defend England from Norman invasion. We're marching towards 9,000 subs. Lend us your sword and click subscribe. Yes, we had our legion. We got to 6,000, the Friendly Neighborhood Legion. But if you want to be part of the invading force to defeat the Norman invasion, to keep the French out of England, then please become part of Harold's army. But then again, I don't want to be part of a losing side either. So it does sound good. It does sound very good. But anyways, if you have a question, we've got about 5 minutes left. We will be back tomorrow, so please vote on the topic you would like to hear for our live stream lec. Was Macbeth real? Yes. Just talked about that. Go watch my video from yesterday. All about Macbeth. The real Macbeth, it's called. Here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, where I discuss how Shakespeare manipulated the narrative, how Macbeth was actually a good king, all of that stuff and more. So, should James Comey of the FBI and Brennan CIA be prosecuted for their Trump collusion lies? I mean, I'm not going to just embrace the narrative that they're lying necessarily. I think that it's obviously warranting an investigation every much as bit as the Epstein stuff. So if they're innocent, they can prove it. If they're guilty, they should go to prison. There you go. Is that such a terrible perspective? Uh, Considering the syncretism of spiritual doctrines and political power in ancient civilizations, how did esoteric beliefs about the soul and cosmic order concretely influence statecraft and imperial policies, and what evidence supports their role in shaping historical trajectories? The real truth of the matter is that a lot of people slept better at night with the idea that they would live again and in glory, and the Egyptians particularly slept better at night with the idea that their soul would continue in a new life and the rich could bring what they had with them. This was huge for ancient civilizations of different types. Yeah, I don't know if I want to say more about that right now. Basically, as a society develops, the culture develops, and as the culture develops, the religions that undergird the culture develop, and as the religions develop, the life after death theories develop. So it becomes more and more complex. Religions become more complex the longer they are around. Christianity is a good example of this because early Christians did not have a full-out creedal faith or confessional faith like they would get in the and wouldn't get it until the 4th century, when the persecution of the church stopped and it became much more of a dominant, organized, structural, systematic religion, whereas before it had been more covert, although definitely with some sort of structure. The ecclesiology, the systematic theology, and the development of Christianity and faith, those things are not compiled in the New Testament. They go through experiential work in the 2nd and 3rd centuries and eventually really get their concrete focus in the 4th century after Constantine and the persecution. How much do you know about George Kennan's The Law and Telegram Shaped U.S. Foreign Policy? Thank you for that one. That's a good one. People don't talk about that enough. George Kennan was the U.S., I believe he was the ambassador to the Soviet Union, and Kennan became extremely skeptical of the Soviet Union in the 1940s, and The Long Telegram basically explained how pernicious and acquisitive and imperialistic he believed the communists to actually be. This was Kennan, although later moderated some of these Lionistic ideas, this basically stoked the fires of anti-communist sentiment, leading to the Second Red Scare, influencing U.S. policies of containment, especially under Harry Truman and what became known as the Truman Doctrine, basically prompting the United States to take a hardline anti-communist stance no matter where. Oh wow, Vincent, you are flesh today. I so appreciate you. Thank you very much, Vincent. I really appreciate you. If you have, you know what, Vincent, I'm going to let you pick next Sunday's live stream lek. That would be really cool. Really appreciate you. So you get to pick, we're not going to vote. You're going to pick a live stream lek for next week. I think that, and I would love to do it. I would love for you to suggest me a good historical topic for me to talk about, something that I haven't talked about, but something that's good. So thank you, Vincent. Keep that in mind and think about what you want to do, and just tell me here on the live stream. By the way, if you want further conversation with me, if you want to give more feedback or ideas or things like that, you can email me. Simon hopefully put the email in the chat, or he can do so right now if he's able to. But it's friendlyneighborhoodhistory1, or I think it's just friendlyneighborhoodhistory@gmail.com. friendlyneighborhoodhistory@gmail.com, where you can give me suggestions and ideas about what you would like me to talk about. You can go into more depth. We can have more of a conversation. All of that great stuff. So let's see. We've got about 2 more minutes left. So does anyone have any last questions or comments they would like to bring up? We're going to end on time. Usually we go way over because we're having so many great comments and questions. Historical topic must be anything Scottish heritage, like Gaelic. Okay. I will talk about what about the Stuart dynasty? Is that good for you? How Scotland got unified? The real Braveheart? What do you want? There's a lot there. Friendlyneighborhoodhistory@gmail.com. I would love to have a live conversation with you someday. Sending lots of love from Buenos Aires, Argentina. Take care and hope to talk soon. Kiara, you're welcome to come and join us, as are all of you, every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern for the live stream lek, where you can hear me discuss a historical topic in even more depth than I have today. Or you can come and get your questions and history yings and yangs answered every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, like you have done so. Yes, friendly_history1 is the Insta handle, where we stream and get questions answered on Fridays at 7 Eastern. Loch Ness Monster? Maybe the history of the Loch Ness area, emphasis on the monster? We can do our best. We'll see. All right, 1 more minute. Anyone got anything else they want to talk about? GMCC, Ozzy, my pleasure. It's always great to see you. And Simon, thank you so much for moderating. Please show some love to Simon. He does such a great job. And all pro bono. When we get to 10,000, we're going to change that. I wish the time difference between our two countries was easier to manage. Yes, I do. I do too. But my videos and email are always open to you if you want to talk about things, Kiara, in a more easier way. I didn't put a description because I didn't put an actual. I didn't actually schedule it. I will schedule a live stream lecture for tomorrow, but I did it kind of spontaneous because I have been busy this weekend, very, very busy this weekend. And the reason I was late was because I had to get my hair cut because I can't look that ratty forever. Last question, last call. Anyone have any other history questions they would like me to answer, a topic they would like me to address? And you got 10 seconds. Speak now, forever hold your peace, which nobody says at weddings anymore anyways, so. History of Joan of Arc. Ooh, that's a video topic I'm actually thinking of doing. Basically, this French peasant girl, I'll sum it up really quickly, Kings of Europe. Gosh, that's going to take me a long time. Check out my series on the English kings and my video about English kings and Russian czars and tier ranking them. My series on Russian czars, my series on Russian history. I am a Russian historian. That's all good stuff. And I've got videos on Russian history dropping every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Shorts usually. And my recent video on Peter the Great, I really enjoyed making that. Favorite Roman emperor is probably Trajan. I mean, Optimus Princeps, you can't argue with that. Joan of Arc was a peasant girl who basically felt that visions from the Lord were inspiring her to inspire her countrymen to overthrow the English, and because she was not cowering in fear like so many of them were, she became the leader of the French troops who needed anything at all to be able to defeat the English, and they actually won some major battles like at Orléans. She inspired, along with the French army, the Dauphin to take up the mantle and become King Charles VII, one of the greatest kings in French history. And thank you so much for joining us today. That will about wrap it up. We went a little bit over just for you guys. So good to see all of you. Live stream lecture tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern. Really looking forward to that. A couple hours earlier than we normally start. And yeah, take care. Have a great Saturday or Sunday, wherever you are. And remember to like and subscribe, and love history. Bye-bye now.